You think you know who holds the power in the room? Think again. When Tiffany, a head flight attendant with a superiority complex, saw a black woman in a hoodie sitting in seat 1A, she didn't see a passenger. She saw a target. She mocked her, humiliated her, and dragged her off the plane in handcuffs while the first-class cabin laughed. But Tiffany made one fatal calculation. She didn't check the manifest. 10 minutes later, that same woman walked back onto the jetway, not as a passenger, but as the owner of the entire airline. And the first order of business? It wasn't just a refund, it was a massacre. The early morning fog was still clinging to the tarmac at JFK International Airport. Flight 409, a Royal Horizon Airlines, massive Boeing 777 bound for London Heathrow, was already boarding. This was the flagship route, the crown jewel of the airline, known for serving celebrities, politicians, and the ultra-wealthy. Standing at the door of the aircraft, checking boarding passes with a practiced plastic smile, was Tiffany Reynolds. Tiffany was the purser, the head flight attendant. She had been flying for 15 years, and in her mind, this plane was her personal kingdom. She decided who got the extra champagne, who got the cold shoulder, and who belonged in her exclusive world of first class. She straightened her silk scarf, her eyes scanning the line of passengers. She loved the bespoke suits, the Louis Vuitton carry-ons, the smell of expensive cologne. It validated her. Then she saw her. Walking down the jet bridge was a woman who looked like she had just rolled out of bed. She was a black woman, perhaps in her early 30s, wearing an oversized slate-grey hoodie, black leggings and worn-out sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore large, dark sunglasses, even though they were indoors. She carried nothing but a battered leather rucksack slung over one shoulder. Tiffany's lip curled slightly. Economy is boarding through the second door, she thought. Why can't people read signs? As the woman approached, Tiffany didn't step aside. She blocked the entrance to the first-class aisle, her smile dropping into a look of condescending patience. "Miss," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "Zone 4 boarding is actually through the next door down. This is for first and business class passengers only. You know, the people who paid for priority." The woman paused. She lowered her sunglasses just an inch, revealing tired, sharp brown eyes. "I know where I'm going," she said, her voice calm, slightly raspy. "I'm in 1A. Tiffany actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like a bark. 1A? Honey, 1A is reserved for our VVIPs. It costs $12,000 for a one-way ticket. Now please, step aside. You're blocking Mr. Sterling." Behind the woman stood Arthur Sterling, a known investment banker who flew this route weekly. He looked impatient, checking his Rolex. The woman in the hoodie didn't move. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled boarding pass. She held it up, inches from Tiffany's face. "Ophelia King, seat 1A. Tiffany stared at the paper. She blinked. It looked real, but her brain refused to accept it. This woman, Ophelia, looked like she belonged in the back row near the toilets, not in the most exclusive seat on the plane. "Let me see that," Tiffany snapped, snatching the ticket from Ophelia's hand. She scanned it aggressively. The machine beeped green. Valid. Tiffany's face flushed red. She felt Arthur Sterling's eyes on her. She had just made a scene, and she was wrong. But instead of apologizing, her ego doubled down. "Fine," Tiffany huffed, shoving the ticket back at Ophelia. "But I'm going to need to see your ID once we're seated. We've had a lot of fraudulent credit card bookings lately." Ophelia took the ticket back, her expression unreadable. "Just let me pass," she said quietly. Tiffany stepped aside, but not enough. Ophelia had to squeeze past her, their shoulders brushing. Tiffany dusted off her uniform shoulder as if she had been touched by something dirty. "Trash," Tiffany muttered under her breath, just loud enough for her junior flight attendant, Sarah, to hear. Sarah, a young girl on her probation period, looked nervous. "Tiffany, maybe we should just offer her a drink." "No," Tiffany hissed. "She doesn't get a drink until I clear her ID. I know a scammer when I see one. She probably stole someone's miles. Watch her like a hawk, Sarah. If she touches anything she isn't supposed to, I want to know." Ophelia King walked into the pristine first-class cabin. She found seat 1A, a private suite with sliding doors. She threw her battered rucksack onto the plush leather ottoman and collapsed into the seat. She didn't look like a queen. She looked exhausted. She closed her eyes, hoping for a few hours of sleep before the chaos began. But she had no idea that Tiffany Reynolds was already in the galley, plotting how to get her off the plane. The cabin began to fill up. The air was thick with the scent of fresh orchids and expensive leather. Waiters in white gloves were circulating, offering pre-departure beverages. Dom Perignon 2012, sparkling water with lemon, warm nuts. Tiffany moved through the cabin with the grace of a swan, charming the regulars. "Mr. Sterling, so good to see you again. The usual Scotch?" "Mrs. Vanderveer, I love that scarf. Paris?" She made a show of being the perfect hostess. But every time she passed seat 1A, her demeanor changed instantly. It went from warm sunshine to absolute zero. Ophelia had taken off her sunglasses and was reading a thick file of documents. She looked up as Tiffany breezed past with a tray of crystal flutes. "Excuse me," Ophelia said. Her voice was polite but firm. "Could I get some water, please?" "No ice." Tiffany didn't stop. She didn't even look down. She continued walking to seat 2B, where a young tech millionaire was sitting. "Champagne, sir?" she cooed. Ophelia frowned. She waited for Tiffany to return. As Tiffany walked back toward the galley, Ophelia raised her hand. "Miss, I asked for water." Tiffany stopped. She turned slowly, resting the tray on her hip. The cabin went quiet. Other passengers looked up over their newspapers. "I heard you," Tiffany said, her voice projecting clearly across the small cabin. "But as I explained at the door, I need to verify your identity before I can serve you. It's airline policy for suspicious bookings." "Suspicious?" Ophelia put the file down. "I have a boarding pass. You scanned it. It's green. Bring me a water." "Don't speak to me with that tone," Tiffany snapped, her eyes narrowing. "You might be used to ordering people around in whatever hood you crawled out of. But on this plane, I am in charge. You will get water when I decide you are cleared." "This is ridiculous," Ophelia said, unbuckling her seatbelt. She stood up. She wasn't tall, but she had a presence that suddenly filled the suite. "I want to speak to the captain." "Sit down!" Tiffany yelled. It was a command, loud and jarring. "You are violating federal aviation safety rules by standing up while the aircraft is refueling. Sit down, or I will have you removed." "The seatbelt sign is off," Ophelia pointed out, gesturing to the light above. "It is my instruction," Tiffany screamed. She was shaking now, fueled by a toxic mix of adrenaline and prejudice. She felt the eyes of the wealthy white passengers on her. She felt she was protecting them, protecting the sanctity of first class from this intruder. Mr. Sterling, in seat 1B, sighed loudly. "Oh, for heaven's sake," he groaned. "Just kick her off so we can leave, Tiffany. I have a meeting in London at 8 p.m. That was all the permission Tiffany needed. She marched to the cockpit intercom phone. She stared dead at Ophelia while she dialed. "Captain," Tiffany said into the receiver, her voice trembling with fake fear. "We have a situation in first. A passenger in 1A. She's aggressive. She's refusing crew instructions. And she's threatening me. I don't feel safe flying with her." She paused, listening to the captain's response. A smug smile crept onto her face. "Understood, Captain. I'll call the gate agents." She hung up the phone and turned to Ophelia. "Grab your trash bag," Tiffany spat, pointing at the rucksack. "The police are on their way." Ophelia didn't yell. She didn't scream. She looked at Tiffany with an expression that wasn't fear. It was pity. It was the look a lion gives a hyena that has bitten off more than it can chew. "You really want to do this?" Ophelia asked softly. "I'm giving you one chance to de-escalate this. Check the manifest properly. Look at the notes attached to seat 1A. "I don't need to read notes to know trash when I see it," Tiffany sneered. 2 minutes later, 3 Port Authority police officers boarded the plane. They were large men, looking annoyed at the delay. "Where is she?" the lead officer asked. "There." Tiffany pointed like an accusing child. "She threatened to assault me." The officer approached Ophelia. "Ma'am, grab your bags. You're coming with us." Ophelia looked at the officer. "I haven't done anything. This woman refused me service and then lied to the captain." "We can sort that out on the jetway, ma'am. Right now, the captain wants you off the plane. And under federal law, the captain's word is final. Let's go. Don't make me use cuffs." Ophelia slowly picked up her rucksack. She grabbed her file of documents. She stood up and walked into the aisle. As she passed Tiffany, the flight attendant leaned in close. "Go back to Spirit Airlines, sweetie," she whispered. "You never belonged here." Ophelia stopped. She took off her sunglasses completely. "Remember that sentence, Tiffany. I want you to remember exactly how you felt when you said that." Ophelia was escorted off the plane. The heavy door of the Boeing 787 slammed shut behind her. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere lightened. Mr. Sterling clapped his hands. "Bravo, Tiffany! Excellent handling of the riffraff." Tiffany beamed. She felt powerful. She felt invincible. She went to the galley and popped the cork on a bottle of Dom Perignon for herself. She took a swig straight from the bottle. "Good riddance," she laughed. But on the jetway, Ophelia wasn't being arrested. She had stopped walking. She pulled a black titanium phone from her hoodie pocket. She dialed a number. "This is Ophelia King," she said into the phone. "Code red at JFK. Horizon Flight 409. Freeze the runway. Don't let that plane take off." There was a pause on the other end. "Yes," Ophelia said, her voice cold as ice. "I want the board of directors here. Now. And bring the legal team." The Boeing 777 pushed back from the gate. The engines hummed to life, a deep vibration that usually signaled the start of a long journey. Tiffany Reynolds was in the forward galley, humming to herself as she prepared the hot towels. She felt lighter, unburdened. The problem was gone. The cabin was pure again. "Sarah," Tiffany called out, "make sure Mr. Sterling gets a second pillow. We want to apologize for the disturbance." The plane began to taxi toward the runway. The safety video played on the screens. Everything was normal. Then the plane stopped. It wasn't a slow, gradual halt. It was abrupt. The brakes hissed violently, and the momentum threw Tiffany slightly forward against the counter. "What now?" she thought, annoyed. "Probably traffic." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, but he didn't sound like his usual confident self. He sounded confused, shaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller from the flight deck. We have just received an emergency order from air traffic control to immediately hold our position. We are being ordered to return to the gate. I repeat, we are returning to the gate immediately. We have not been given a reason, but we must comply." A groan rippled through the first-class cabin. "Unbelievable!" Arthur Sterling shouted, slamming his hand on the armrest. "I'm going to miss my connection in London. Tiffany, what is going on?" Tiffany rushed into the aisle, putting on her best calm face. "I'm sure it's just a minor technical light, Mr. Sterling. We'll have it sorted in 10 minutes. Just a glitch." But as she looked out the window, her blood ran cold. It wasn't a maintenance truck approaching the plane. It was a convoy. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows were racing across the tarmac, flanked by 2 airport police cruisers with lights flashing. They weren't coming for a repair. They were coming for the plane. The aircraft was towed back to the gate at a speed that felt dangerously fast. When the jetway reconnected, there was a heavy, ominous thud. Tiffany smoothed her skirt. Maybe they found drugs in her bag, she thought, trying to comfort herself. Maybe that woman was a mule. That's why they're back. I was right. I'm a hero. She stood by the main cabin door, ready to greet the police and give her statement. She practiced her lines in her head. She was erratic, officer. I feared for the safety of the flight. The fasten seatbelt sign turned off. The cabin door handle turned from the outside. Tiffany put on her serious, concerned face. The door swung open. But it wasn't the police who stepped through. It was Jonathan Pierce, the chief operating officer of Royal Horizon Airlines, the man who ran the day-to-day operations of the entire global fleet. Tiffany had only seen him once, at a company Christmas gala, from a distance. He was a man who terrified everyone, and right now he looked like he was about to have a heart attack. His tie was crooked. He was sweating. "Mr. Pierce?" Tiffany gasped, her eyes widening. "Sir, what an honor. I assume you're here about the security incident. I handled it personally. The passenger was—" "Shut up," Pierce said. He didn't shout it. He whispered it, breathless and terrified. He didn't even look at her. He stepped aside, pressing his back against the galley wall, as if to make way for royalty. "Right this way, ma'am," Pierce said, bowing his head slightly. And then she walked in. Ophelia King. She was still wearing the slate-grey hoodie. She still had the battered rucksack, but the handcuffs were gone, and the police officers behind her weren't arresting her. They were carrying her bags. Ophelia walked onto the plane, not like a passenger, but like she owned the very air inside the cabin. She stopped right in front of Tiffany. Tiffany's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her brain couldn't process the image. "You," Tiffany stammered. "How did you get back on?" "Security! Captain!" Ophelia slowly removed her sunglasses again. She looked Tiffany up and down, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "I told you to check the manifest, Tiffany," Ophelia said softly. "But you were too busy looking at my hoodie." The first-class cabin was silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. Mr. Sterling had lowered his newspaper. The tech millionaire had taken off his headphones. Jonathan Pierce, the COO, cleared his throat. He stepped into the center of the aisle, his hands trembling slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pierce announced, his voice cracking, "I apologize for the delay. There has been a significant misunderstanding regarding the ownership of this aircraft." He gestured to Ophelia. "I would like to introduce you to Ms. Ophelia King. As of this morning, the acquisition deal was finalized. Ms. King's private equity firm, King Global Holdings, has acquired a majority-controlling stake in Royal Horizon Airlines. She is the new owner of this airline." The silence shattered. Gasps erupted from the seats. Mr. Sterling choked on his scotch. "The owner," he sputtered. "Her!" Tiffany felt her knees give way. She grabbed the jump seat for support. The world was spinning. The woman she had called trash. The woman she had accused of fraud. The woman she had kicked off the plane. She wasn't just a VVIP. She was the boss. The boss's boss. She was the one who signed the checks. Ophelia didn't look at the passengers. She kept her eyes locked on Tiffany. I decided to fly commercial today, to see how my new investment operates, Ophelia said, her voice projecting clearly without shouting. I wanted to see the crown jewel service I've heard so much about. I dressed down because I wanted to see how you treat regular people, Tiffany, not just the ones in Italian suits. Ophelia took a step closer. Tiffany shrank back, pressing herself into the galley cabinets. And what did I find? Ophelia continued. I found prejudice. I found arrogance. I found a purser who thinks she is the gatekeeper of dignity. Miss King, please, Tiffany whimpered, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. I didn't know. If I had known it was you, I would have— You would have what? Ophelia cut her off sharply. Kissed my ring? Served me champagne? That's the problem, Tiffany. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with basic human respect. You treated me like a criminal because of how I looked. You abused your power because you thought I had none. Ophelia turned to the cockpit. The door was open. Captain Miller was standing there, looking pale. Captain, Ophelia said, why did you authorize my removal? The captain stammered. The purser informed me there was a threat. Standard protocol is to trust the purser's assessment. Did you come out to verify? Ophelia asked. Did you ask to speak to me? Or did you just take her word for it because it was easier? The captain looked down at his shoes. I followed protocol, ma'am. Your protocol is flawed, Ophelia said, and your judgment is weak. She turned back to Jonathan Pierce. Jonathan, give me the crew tablet. Pierce scrambled to hand over the iPad used by the flight attendants. Ophelia tapped the screen, bringing up the crew manifest for Flight 409. She looked at Tiffany. You've been flying for 15 years, Tiffany. You have a pension. You have seniority. You probably thought you were untouchable. I have a family, Tiffany sobbed, the tears ruining her pristine makeup. Please, Miss King, I made a mistake. It was a lapse in judgment. I'm begging you. Ophelia's face remained stone cold. A mistake is spilling coffee. A mistake is forgetting a name. What you did was malice. You humiliated me. You had me arrested. Ophelia leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. You told me to go back to Spirit Airlines. You said I didn't belong here. Ophelia tapped the tablet screen. Well, Tiffany, now you don't. Ophelia handed the tablet back to Pierce. Tiffany Reynolds, Ophelia announced. You are terminated, effective immediately. Not just from this flight, from the company. And I will personally ensure that the note on your permanent record details exactly why. You will never work in aviation again. You won't even get a job handing out peanuts at a bus station. Tiffany wailed, covering her face with her hands. No, you can't do this. Get your bags, Ophelia ordered, and get off my plane. Tiffany stood frozen. Now, Ophelia roared. The power in her voice made the champagne glasses rattle. Tiffany grabbed her purse, sobbing uncontrollably, and ran down the jetway, the sound of her heels clicking frantically, fading into the distance. Ophelia took a deep breath and turned to Sarah, the young junior flight attendant who had been standing in the corner, shaking. And you, Ophelia said. Sarah flinched. I wanted to give you a drink, Miss King, I told her. But you didn't stop her, Ophelia said firmly. You watched. You stood by and let her bully a paying customer. Passivity is complicity, Sarah. If you can't stand up to a bully in a uniform, you can't be trusted with the safety of these passengers in an emergency. Sarah started to cry silently. Pack your things, Ophelia said. You're off the flight. You're suspended pending a review. If you want to keep your job, you'll spend the next 6 months in retraining. Decide if this career is for you. Go. Sarah nodded hurriedly, grabbed her tote, and fled. Ophelia then turned to the cockpit. Captain Miller and the first officer were standing there. "Captain," Ophelia said, "you are the supreme authority on this vessel. You allowed your authority to be weaponized by a bigot. You didn't investigate. You just reacted. That is dangerous." "Ma'am, with all due respect," the captain started. "You're relieved of duty," Ophelia stated. "Both of you. Pack your flight bags. I want a new flight deck crew. I don't care if we have to fly them in from Chicago. I'm not flying over the Atlantic with a captain who is too lazy to open a door." "This is outrageous," the captain spat, his face turning red. "The union will hear about this." "The union works for the employees," Ophelia said calmly. "I own the company. I suggest you leave before I file charges for unlawful detainment. I have lawyers who are very bored and very expensive." The captain glared at her, jaw clenched, but he saw the look in Jonathan Pierce's eyes, a look that said, "Do not fight her." He grabbed his cap and stormed off the plane, followed by the first officer. The entire crew was gone. The plane was empty of staff. Ophelia stood alone in the galley, facing the cabin full of stunned millionaires. She looked at Mr. Sterling in seat 1B, the man who had cheered when she was kicked off. "Mr. Sterling," Ophelia said, her voice pleasant now. I, Sterling stammered, sweating profusely. "Miss King, surely you understand. The confusion—" "Oh, I understand perfectly," Ophelia said. "You wanted the riffraff gone so you could make your meeting." She pulled out her phone. "Jonathan," she said to the COO, "deboard everyone." "Everyone?" Pierce asked, shocked. "Everyone," Ophelia said. "Cancel the flight. This plane is contaminated with bad energy. I'm grounding Flight 409. "But my meeting!" Sterling shouted. Ophelia looked at him and smiled. A genuine, dazzling smile. "You can take the next flight, Mr. Sterling. It leaves tomorrow morning. Economy class is boarding at 6 a.m. I suggest you get in line early." Ophelia picked up her rucksack. "Jonathan, have the mechanics tow this plane to the hangar. I want the interior refitted, and get me a fresh crew for a private flight. I'm going to London alone." She walked past the stunned passengers, down the aisle, and back out the door, leaving a cabin full of the elite, realizing they were stranded in New York. The walk from Gate 42 to the curbside pickup at JFK usually took Tiffany Reynolds 15 minutes. Today, it felt like a death march that lasted a lifetime. She was no longer the purser of the flagship London route. She was a liability. Escorted by 2 silent security guards, she was forced to strip off her ID badge at the checkpoint. The plastic rectangle, which had been her passkey to the world for a decade and a half, was dropped unceremoniously into a plastic bin. Next came her scarf, the silk signature of Royal Horizon Airlines. When she unknotted it from her neck, she felt naked. She was just a woman in a polyester suit, dragging a suitcase through a terminal that no longer belonged to her. Every glance from a passing stranger felt like an indictment. Did they know? Could they smell the failure on her? She kept her head down, pushed through the revolving doors, and stepped into the biting wind of the passenger pickup zone. She didn't call a company car. She called an Uber, a Toyota Camry with a cracked windshield. As she slumped into the back seat, her phone, which she had turned off during the chaos, buzzed to life. Then it buzzed again, and again. Within seconds, it was vibrating so violently against her leg, it felt like it was burning. Notifications were cascading down the screen faster than she could read them. Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, Facebook. You have been tagged in a video. You have been tagged in a video. DM from Sarah. OMG Tiff, have you seen this? It's everywhere. With trembling fingers, Tiffany opened the link. It was a video from the perspective of Seat 2C. The caption read, "Karen flight attendant tries to bully black CEO. Gets destroyed. What karma, what royal horizon, or fired." The video had been uploaded 40 minutes ago. It already had 4.2 million views. Tiffany watched in horror. The camera angle was unflinching. It showed her sneering face in high definition. It captured the exact moment she poked a finger toward Ophelia. It caught the audio perfectly. "Go back to Spirit Airlines, sweetie." And then the comments. The internet is a cruel judge, and the verdict was unanimous. Imagine being this arrogant on a salary while talking to a billionaire. Her face when she realized, priceless. I fly this route. I know her. She's always been nasty to anyone who isn't wearing a Rolex. Finally got what she deserved. Tiffany threw the phone onto the floor of the car, hyperventilating. She wasn't just fired. She was globally humiliated. Her reputation, carefully curated over 15 years of sucking up to the elite, had been incinerated in 40 minutes. The next morning, Tiffany woke up in her apartment, hoping it was a fever dream. The silence of her kitchen told her it wasn't. She showered, dressed in her most professional charcoal suit, and drove to the flight attendants' union headquarters in Queens. She marched into the office of Mr. Henderson, her union representative. She had paid her dues faithfully every month for 15 years. They were supposed to protect her. They were supposed to be her shield. "I want to file a grievance," Tiffany announced, sitting down without being asked. "I was terminated without a hearing. It was a hostile work environment. Ophelia King targeted me." Mr. Henderson didn't look up from his desk. He was a weary man who had seen everything. But today, he looked particularly tired of her nonsense. He slid a thick manila folder across the mahogany desk. "We can't file a grievance, Tiffany," Henderson said quietly. "What do you mean you can't?" Tiffany's voice rose to a shriek. "I have rights. I have seniority. She can't just fire me because she owns the plane." "Actually, she can. Read the file." Henderson pointed a pen at the document. "You didn't just break company policy. You broke federal law. You fabricated a security threat. You lied to the captain about a passenger's behavior to facilitate an unlawful removal. That is a violation of Federal Aviation Regulation 121-580. The FAA is already opening an investigation into your license." Tiffany felt the blood drain from her face. "So, just a suspension, then? A fine?" Henderson took off his glasses and looked her in the eye. "Tiffany, listen to me closely. Ophelia King didn't just fire you. This morning at 8:01 a.m., a memo was sent to the Global Aviation Alliance. It detailed the incident and flagged you as a security risk and a brand liability. I called my contact at Delta. I called United. I even called the regional carriers." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. "You are blacklisted. Nobody is going to hire you. You won't be serving coffee on a plane ever again. You won't even be working the check-in desk. You are done in this industry." Tiffany stared at him, her mouth agape. "But I have a mortgage. I have a lease on my car. This is all I know how to do." "Then you better learn something else fast," Henderson said, opening his laptop to dismiss her. "And Tiffany, don't ask for a reference." While Tiffany's world was collapsing in Queens, a different kind of destruction was happening in the glass-walled skyscrapers of Manhattan. Arthur Sterling, the investment banker who had laughed at Ophelia and urged the crew to kick off the riffraff, walked into his office at Sterling Capital with a coffee in hand. He felt fine. He had caught the morning flight, made it back, and assumed the incident was just a funny anecdote to tell the guys at the country club. He swiped his keycard to enter the trading floor. The light blinked red. Access denied. He tried again. Red. A security guard, a man Arthur had walked past every day for 5 years without ever acknowledging, stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, you need to come with me. The CEO wants to see you." Arthur was escorted to the top floor. The office was dead silent. The secretaries weren't typing. They were whispering. He walked into the office of Marcus Galloway. Wait, no Marcus. Let's use Mr. Caldwell, the CEO of the firm. Caldwell looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city, holding a glass of scotch, even though it was 10 a.m. "Rough morning with the key cards, Caldwell," Arthur joked nervously, sitting down. "System glitch?" Caldwell turned around. His eyes were cold, filled with a mixture of fury and fear. "Do you know how much liquidity King Global Holdings provides to this firm, Arthur?" Arthur blinked. "Ophelia King's firm? I don't know, a substantial amount. She's a passive investor." "She was a passive investor," Caldwell corrected, his voice shaking. "She provides 40% of our operating capital, $2 billion in managed assets." "Okay," Arthur shrugged. So, at 9 a.m., right when the markets opened, we received a formal notice of withdrawal, total liquidation of her position. She is pulling every single cent out of sterling capital. Arthur's stomach dropped. That's impossible. There are lock-up periods. Penalties." "She paid the penalties," Caldwell roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "She doesn't care about the fines. She wants to bleed us. And do you know why? She sent a personal letter with the withdrawal order." Caldwell picked up a piece of heavy, cream-colored stationery. He read it aloud, his voice trembling with rage. "Mr. Caldwell, I do not trust my money with institutions that employ men of low character. A man who judges others by their appearance lacks the foresight required to manage risk. Arthur Sterling showed me exactly who he is on Flight 409. If he represents your firm's judgment, then your firm is a bad bet. Remove the rot or I bury the bank." Arthur sat frozen. The air conditioning in the room seemed to stop. "She's bluffing," Arthur whispered. "The wire transfer is already initiating, Arthur," Caldwell screamed. "Our stock price is down 12% in the last hour because rumors are leaking that a whale is exiting. You have single-handedly triggered a bank run." Caldwell pressed a button on his intercom. "Security, come in." "You can't do this," Arthur stammered, standing up. "I bring in millions in commissions." "You cost us billions," Caldwell spat. "You're fired for cause, gross misconduct, and reputational damage. We are freezing your unvested stocks to cover the legal fees we're about to incur trying to survive this. Get out of my building before I throw you out the window." 2 large security guards entered. They didn't let Arthur pack his box. They didn't let him take his framed photos or his lucky stapler. They grabbed him by the arms and marched him past the rows of traders, his former colleagues, who all stared at their screens, refusing to make eye contact. Arthur Sterling was thrown onto the sidewalk of Wall Street, his tie crooked, his access pass gone. Across town, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Ophelia King sat on a velvet sofa, sipping peppermint tea. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jonathan Pierce, her COO. Message: "The withdrawal from Sterling Capital is complete, and the union confirmed Reynolds's blacklisting. Is there anything else?" Ophelia looked at the message. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel excitement. She just felt the cold satisfaction of balance being restored. She typed a short reply. "No, it's done. We fly clean from now on." She set the phone down and looked out at the city. The karmic debt had been paid in full, but for Tiffany and Arthur, the interest payments were just beginning. 6 months later. New York City was in the grip of a brutal February freeze. The slush on the sidewalks had turned grey and hard, much like Tiffany Reynolds's spirit. The glorious life of a purser, the layovers in Paris, the shopping sprees in Dubai, the free champagne in the galleys, felt like a memory from a past life, or perhaps a movie she had once watched. Her reality now was the smell of stale fryer grease and the ache in her lower back that never seemed to go away. Tiffany was working the lunch rush at Sal's Metro Diner, a chaotic, mid-range eatery near Grand Central Station. It wasn't a place where people lingered over fine wine. It was a place where commuters grabbed a burger, shouted at their phones, and left crumpled dollar bills on sticky tables. "Table 4 needs ketchup. Move it, Reynolds," shouted Sal, the manager. Sal was a short, angry man who stained his shirts with marinara sauce and didn't care about Tiffany's 15 years of aviation safety training. To him, she was just the new waitress who was slow on the refill. "Coming, Sal," Tiffany muttered, grabbing a bottle. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirrored wall behind the counter. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Her signature blonde hair, once blown out to perfection, was pulled back in a frizzy, practical bun. Her makeup was minimal because she couldn't afford the Sephora brands anymore. The bags under her eyes were dark purple. The blacklist had been absolute. Ophelia King hadn't just fired her. She had nuked her career. Tiffany had applied to Delta, American, JetBlue. She had even applied to a tiny charter airline that flew cargo to Alaska. The answer was always the same. Application rejected. With no income, the dominoes fell fast. First, the leased Mercedes was towed away in the middle of the night. Then came the eviction notice from her luxury apartment in Chelsea. She was now renting a damp basement studio in Queens, with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. She had sold her Louis Vuitton bags on eBay just to pay the deposit. She was humbled, she was broken, and she was exhausted. The bell above the diner door jingled. A gust of icy wind blew in, followed by a customer. Tiffany didn't look up immediately. She was wiping down a table, trying to scrub away a stubborn coffee ring. "One person," a voice said. The voice was calm, melodic, and commanded attention, without being loud. It cut through the clatter of silverware and the sizzling of the grill. Tiffany froze. The rag in her hand stopped moving. She knew that voice. It was a voice that had haunted her nightmares for half a year. Slowly, terrifyingly, Tiffany lifted her head. Standing at the hostess podium was Ophelia King. She looked magnificent. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She was wrapped in a camel-colored cashmere coat, a navy scarf draped elegantly over her shoulders. She held a leather portfolio in one hand. She looked like the owner of the world. Ophelia was looking at her phone, checking an email. She hadn't seen Tiffany yet. Tiffany's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. She's going to see me. She's going to tell Sal. She's going to get me fired from this job, too. Tiffany wanted to run. She wanted to hide in the walk-in freezer, but her feet were lead. "Right this way, Mum," the hostess said, guiding Ophelia to a quiet booth in the corner. Tiffany's section. Tiffany ducked behind the beverage station, breathing hard. "I can't do it," she whispered to herself. "I can't serve her." "Reynolds!" Sal barked from the kitchen window. "Table 9. Customer is waiting. Go." Tiffany flinched. She had no choice. If she didn't go, Sal would fire her on the spot. She needed the tips. She needed to pay her electric bill. She took a deep breath, grabbed a menu and a glass of water, and walked toward table 9. Her hands were shaking so badly the water sloshed over the rim of the glass. Ophelia had removed her coat and was setting out a few files on the table. She was reviewing the quarterly earnings for Royal Horizon Airlines. The logo on the folder, a golden sun rising, mocked Tiffany. Tiffany approached the table. She kept her head down, her eyes fixed on her worn-out sneakers. "Here is your water," Tiffany whispered, her voice barely audible. She placed the glass down with a trembling hand. "Thank you," Ophelia said, not looking up from her document. "I'll start with a black coffee, please. And the Cobb salad." "Yes, ma'am," Tiffany squeaked. She turned to flee, but in her haste, her hip bumped the edge of the table. The salt shaker wobbled and fell onto the floor with a loud plastic clatter. "I'm so sorry," Tiffany gasped, dropping to her knees to retrieve it. Ophelia looked down. She saw the frantic, terrified waitress scrambling on the dirty floor. "It's fine," Ophelia said kindly. "Don't worry about it." Tiffany grabbed the shaker and stood up. As she rose, she came face to face with Ophelia. The silence that followed was deafening. The noise of the diner seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of tension. Ophelia's eyes widened slightly. She tilted her head, studying the woman before her. The recognition was slow, but inevitable. She took in the stained apron, the tired eyes, the frizzy hair. "Tiffany?" Ophelia asked softly. Tiffany felt tears welling up instantly. Hot, shameful tears. She clutched the salt shaker to her chest like a shield. "Miss King!" Tiffany choked out. I didn't know you were coming here." Ophelia sat back in the booth. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't vindictive. It was something worse. It was pity. "I have a meeting nearby," Ophelia said, her voice neutral. "I didn't know you worked here." "It's the only place that would take me," Tiffany confessed, the words tumbling out. "I tried everywhere else, but the blacklist, it's everywhere." Ophelia nodded slowly. "Actions have echoes, Tiffany. They travel far." Tiffany looked around nervously to make sure Sal wasn't watching. She leaned in, desperation in her eyes. "Miss King, please, don't cause a scene. I need this job. I'm living in a basement. I lost the car. I lost the apartment. I have nothing left. If Sal finds out who I am or who you are, he'll fire me just to avoid the drama." It was a pathetic sight. The woman who had once wielded her authority like a weapon, threatening to arrest passengers, was now begging a billionaire for the right to serve a $12 salad. Ophelia looked at her. She saw the fear. She saw the total dismantling of the ego that had once filled the first-class cabin. "I'm not going to get you fired, Tiffany," Ophelia said quietly. Tiffany let out a shuddering breath. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Go get my coffee," Ophelia said. Tiffany rushed away. She prepared the coffee with the care of a surgeon. She made sure the cup was clean, the saucer was dry. She brought it back to the table, placing it down gently. "Is there anything else I can get you?" Tiffany asked, standing like a soldier at attention. Ophelia took a sip. "Sit down for a moment, Tiffany." I can't. I'm on shift. Sal will... I'll buy the salad. I'm a paying customer. Sit." It was an order, but it wasn't shouted. It was the calm command of a leader. Tiffany slid into the booth opposite Ophelia, sitting on the edge of the vinyl seat. She felt small. Ophelia closed her file. "Tell me, do you miss it? The sky?" Tiffany looked out the window at the grey street. "Every day," she whispered. "I miss the view. I miss the travel. But mostly, I miss feeling like I was someone." "You thought the uniform made you someone," Ophelia corrected gently. "You thought that because you served champagne to rich people, you were better than the people in the back of the plane. You confused proximity to power with actual power." Tiffany looked down at her hands, red and chapped from washing dishes. "I know. I was awful. I watched the video. God, I watched it 1,000 times. I looked at myself and I hated her. I hated how I spoke to you. I judged you because of a hoodie. You judged me because you thought I was weak, Ophelia said, her eyes piercing. And you wanted to feel strong. That's why bullies do what they do. They stand on other people to make themselves feel tall. Ophelia reached into her luxury handbag. Tiffany flinched, half expecting a lawsuit or a restraining order. Instead, Ophelia pulled out a crisp $100 bill. She placed it on the table between them. Tiffany stared at the money. It was Benjamin Franklin's face, staring up from the Formica table. That bill was a week's worth of groceries for her now. I want you to take this, Ophelia said. I can't, Tiffany shook her head. I didn't earn it. The service wasn't. I dropped the salt. Take it, Ophelia insisted. But this isn't a tip for the coffee, and it's not charity. Tiffany looked up, confused. Then what is it? It's tuition, Ophelia said. Tuition? Yes. You're in school now, Tiffany. This diner, this basement apartment, this is your classroom. Life is teaching you the lesson you refuse to learn at 30,000 feet. Ophelia leaned forward, her voice intense and low. I want you to take this money and buy a mirror, a good one. Hang it by your door in that basement. And every single morning, before you put on that apron and come here to wipe tables, I want you to look into that mirror. I want you to look yourself in the eye and ask, am I a human being today? Or am I just a uniform? Tears spilled over Tiffany's lashes and rolled down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Because the moment you start thinking you are better than the person you are serving, whether it's a CEO or a janitor, you will lose this job too, Ophelia continued. And next time, there won't be a billionaire there to give you a soft landing. There will just be the street. Ophelia stood up. She buttoned her cashmere coat. She gathered her files. I have to go. My meeting is starting. Tiffany stood up too, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She clutched the $100 bill. Ms. King, Tiffany called out as Ophelia turned to leave. Ophelia paused and looked back. I really am sorry, Tiffany said, her voice breaking. Not because I lost my job, but because I treated you like you were nothing. And you're the only person who has looked me in the eye in 6 months. Ophelia's expression softened, just a fraction. Humility looks better on you than the scarf ever did, Tiffany, Ophelia said. Keep the change. With that, Ophelia King walked out of the diner, into the biting wind, her head held high. She didn't look back. She had an airline to run, a world to connect. Tiffany stood in the center of the bustling diner, the noise of the lunch rush crashing back around her. Sal was yelling her name from the kitchen. A baby was crying at table 4. She looked at the $100 bill in her hand. Then she looked at the door where Ophelia had vanished. For the first time in 15 years, Tiffany Reynolds didn't feel like a victim. She didn't feel like a queen. She felt like a person who had been given a second chance to build a soul, starting from the ground up. "Reynolds, move it!" Sal screamed. Tiffany took a deep breath. She pocketed the bill. She grabbed the coffee pot. "Coming, Sal," she said, her voice steady. She walked to the next table, where an elderly man in a tattered coat was counting coins for a coffee. Tiffany poured him a cup, fresh and hot. She smiled at him. A real smile, not the plastic one she used to wear in first class. "It's on the house today, sir," she whispered, and for the first time in her life, Tiffany Reynolds finally truly served someone. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Flight 409. It's a story about power, prejudice, and the brutal efficiency of karma. Tiffany Reynolds spent her career looking down on people, only to realize that the ground is a very hard place to land when you fall. She learned the hard way that you can't judge a book by its cover, or a bank account by a hoodie. Ophelia King didn't just buy an airline that day. She bought a lesson for everyone who watched. True class isn't about what you drink or where you sit. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. In the end, Tiffany lost her wings, but she might have finally found her feet. I hope you enjoyed this dramatic story of justice served cold. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm and lets me know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're the first to see the next video. Comment. Question of the day. Do you think Ophelia was right to blacklist Tiffany for life? Or does everyone deserve a second chance in their career? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.